Welcome back to part 2 of lesson 6. We're going to cover clauses, fragments, run-ons, all that good stuff, so the grammar part of the lesson. Okay, so clauses, the basics. A clause is the smallest grammatical unit that can express a complete proposition. A typical clause consists of a subject and a predicate. A predicate is just a fancy word for a verb phrase. It's going to be verb with any objects and modifiers that go along with it. Alright, there are a number of different clauses that we're going to talk about a little bit today, but essentially I want you to be able to make the distinction between a dependent and an independent clause. As long as you can make the distinction between those two, you shouldn't have any issues with fragments and run-ons. Anyways, there are a few we're going to talk about today. There's a main or an independent clause, a subordinate, which is a type of dependent clause, an adjective, a noun, an adverbial, etc. These are all different types of clauses that we're going to run into. They all essentially function as dependent clauses and can also function as a type of fragment. Every clause to be considered a clause has to have both a subject and a verb. Other characteristics will help you distinguish one type of clause from another, and the characteristics are things that I'm going to be going over today. Alright, so independent clauses. These are the only kind of clause that can stand on their own. They can be their own sentence, essentially. They must contain both a subject, a verb, and then enter into compiling into a complete thought. So you have to have a subject, a verb, a complete thought, which is the same definition we have for a complete sentence, because independent clauses can stand alone as their own. Alright, so examples you see towards the bottom of the screen, you see my dog barks or the car stops. So dog barks, subject verb, car stop, subject verb. Relative clauses. These are a type of dependent clause. They have they work as an independent clause, but somebody decided to ruin the whole thing and put something called a subordinating conjunction at the beginning. When you put a subordinate conjunction at the beginning of a completely good independent clause, you ruin the entire mess. We do this by accident a lot of the times when we're talking. We do it. I see it all over the place on social media. It just has no place in standard academic English. So a subordinating conjunction, which we might refer to as subordinators, these are conjunctions that join an independent clause and a dependent clause. They can also introduce adverbial clauses. Essentially, what this does is you may have a subject and a verb in the sentence, but that subordinating conjunction turns it into an incomplete thought. Because when you put a subordinating conjunction into a clause, it requires another part or another piece of information outside of the clause. We see this here. Whenever my dog barks. So my dog barks is okay on its own, but when we stick that pesky word whenever, or if we put because at the beginning, those are subordinating conjunctions. They cause problems. Same thing with because of the rain. Well, that causes a problem. That's not a complete sentence. It's not a complete thought at all. Here's some examples of subordinating conjunctions. You see this really lengthy list. After, although, as if, as long as much as soon as though, because, before, even if, etc. So this is a really good list. You can also find other lists if you just check out Google and do an image search for subordinating conjunctions. You can find some pretty extensive lists, and your book has some as well that'll help you out with identifying these. Essentially, this is one of those lists that I would just recommend kind of pinning up near your workspace so that you know to be careful if you see these words somewhere, that you might be writing a dependent clause that has a problem with subordinating conjunctions. Alright, so we also have adverbial clauses. These, essentially, when I say an adverbial, adjective, or noun clause, I'm just telling you that it's a clause that functions as a noun or a verb or an adverb. Instead of being a single word, like an adverb, very quickly or slowly, it functions as a descriptive unit. Kind of like a predicate is not just a verb, it's all the stuff that goes with it. An adverb clause provides information about what's going on. In the main or independent clause, it's where, when, or why. An adverb, again, is a word that modifies or describes a verb. So sometimes an adverbial clause is a whole thing. So if you look down right below us, you see a little infographic on adverbial clauses. So you see a word, an adverb here that says now. I will eat my broccoli now. That's modifying when we will eat. Okay? But what we did is below that there's the same sentence, but instead of just a plain adverb like now, we have an adverbial clause, like an entire chunk. So I will eat my broccoli after I eat this cookie. You'll notice that a lot of clauses like this tend to double as prepositional phrases after I eat this cookie. Just make sure you can pay attention to these and figure out what they are. They cannot stand on their own. A prepositional phrase cannot stand on its own because we learned that it can never have our subject and verb, so it can't stand on its own. Along those same lines, here's some more information that you can go over on adverbial clauses. So because he was sleepy, he went to bed. So he went to bed, and why? He went because he was sleepy. It may precede or follow the independent clause. It doesn't matter where it is. Now that I've finished the semester, I'm going to rest. Yeah, now that is our adverb. Adjective clauses, same exact thing. They function as adjectives. So we see in our little cool infographic, adjectives which describe nouns can be single words or they can be entire clauses. So he's afraid of pink cats, or he's afraid of cats which or that are pink. So those are entire. The thing about these is when you have adjective clauses, they can sometimes be sort of wordy, and we don't want your paper to be overly wordy. So be conscious of these, not just because they could be incomplete sentences or fragments, but because they can be overly wordy. Noun clauses, again, groups of words that function as nouns. So you should be able to determine what they are by replacing the single noun clause with an actual noun word. So a person, place, or thing, and it should still make sense. So we see right here, we see pepperoni is fine with me. Pepperoni is a noun. It's acting as a subject. I could also just say whatever you want is fine with me. Whatever you want then functions as a single noun to be the subject. Okay, here's some other interesting information on independent versus dependent clauses. The cat playing with the ball is named Spot. That's a complete sentence. It has subject, verb. It has a prepositional phrase with the ball. It has a complete idea. But then we have a dependent clause. The cat playing with the ball. Well, the cat playing with the ball did what? We don't have a predicate. There's no information there. Okay, so we see some examples here. If you're having a little bit of difficulty figuring out independent and dependent clauses, go ahead and get some exercises in. Alright, so these are some links to additional YouTube videos that can help you out with figuring out clauses, etc. They're really good ones. Go ahead, and you won't be able to click on them in the video, but I will provide them for you when I post the videos. Alright, so a quick question as we kind of change over from learning about clauses to fragments and run-ons. Do you think it's true or false that people have the instinctive ability to know where sentences begin and end? Okay. Well, no. Language, we've already discussed, is not an instinctive thing. We're not born able to fluently talk in any language. We actually start off with body language and move to, kid language, and eventually we speak fluently and then we write fluently. There's nothing instinctive about language. There is an instinctive ability to communicate, but not actual language. So then, true or false? Using our sentence skills can help us place punctuation and revise our writing. True. We learn sentence skills when we're in school and as we acclimate to any of our language, so we eventually learn how to speak in complete sentences. Okay, so I want you to take a chance to look at this paragraph. It's kind of amusing, and see what some of the issues are. When I sit down to write, my mind is blank. All I can think of is my name, which seems to me the most boring name in the world. Often I get sleepy and tell myself I should take a short nap. Other times I start daydreaming about things I want to buy. Sometimes I decide I should make a telephone call to someone I know. The piece of paper in front of me is usually still blank when I leave to watch my favorite television show. Major issues in this, like you can't even tell what's going on. Alright, so sentence fragments. We've already kind of talked about those when we talked about clauses. For something to be a sentence, it has to have subject, verb, and a complete thought. But sometimes we have dependent word fragments. Those are those subordinating conjunctions. The easiest way to fix these is to just take out that subordinating conjunction. So if you say although, because, anything like that, take it out. A way you can fix almost any fragment is to just attach it to a complete sentence nearby as well. So sometimes that's simpler, especially if you want to keep your ideas together. Okay, sometimes you have ing fragments. INGs, those gerund words, can be really freaking pesky, so just be careful, especially if you start out a sentence with an ing word. and make sure that you're saying exactly what you want to say. The easiest way to fix these is to change it around a little bit and knock off that ing word, or to add it to another independent clause nearby. Okay, we also have added detail fragments. Again, easiest way to fix these, add it to a complete thought, add a subject and verb and make it its own sentence. You see an example down here, and it has an ing word, but they don't always have ing words. Just make sure that if you get up from writing and you sit back down, a lot of times we just instinctively kind of put a period there. We've been taught to put a period whenever we stop writing. That's usually not right, but sometimes we forget about it and it turns into an added detail fragment. Okay, we also have a really simple one, missing subject fragments. You can attach it to another sentence or add a subject. So we see an example here, but then eats junk food. Well, who eats junk food? We don't know because there's no subject. So we might say, but then he eats junk food, or attach to another sentence and say he goes to the gym, but then he eats junk food. Alright, so go ahead and pause the video for a second and complete each of these. These are different types of fragments. When you get done, press play and we'll continue on and finish up with our run-ons. Okay, so run-ons are kind of the opposite of fragments. Is when we have multiple independent clauses and we've shoved them together with no adequate sign of punctuation or break between them. So sometimes there's no punctuation between them, sometimes there's not enough. So we see both examples down here. You have the bus stopped suddenly, I spilled coffee on my shirt. So there's two independent clauses. The bus stopped suddenly, I spilled coffee on my shirt. And then we see the other one. He told me to be quiet, comma, his favorite show was on. That comma, though, is not adequate. So, easiest way to correct run-ons is to completely separate our two independent clauses. Use a period at the end of one and capitalize the first letter in the next one. Next, we can use a comma and a joining word. These are coordinating conjunctions. The easiest way to remember these is the acronym FANBOYS, F-A-N-B-O-Y-S. It stands for and, nor, that's supposed to be nor, for, and, but, for, or, nor, yet, or so. Those all are words that you can use in conjunction with a comma in order to connect things. So, in here, we've used a comma and in the first sentence because we want to say that there's still some kind of connection. A period is like a huge brick wall. A comma is like a speed bump. It says we want a lot of connection still. And then we have a semicolon, which is one of my favorite types of punctuation. You don't have to use a coordinating conjunction with a semicolon. You can just stick it in there between the two complete clauses, and that's totally fine. Sometimes people stick a semicolon and then a word like however and follow it with a comma. That's completely cool too, as long as you know how to properly use it. So again, take a look at this paragraph and kind of see what the problem is. This one actually tends to have an overabundance of punctuation. So my worst experience for the week was going home for lunch rather than eating at work. My children didn't know I was coming. They'd used most of the bread, and all I had to make a sandwich were too thin, crumpled pieces of toast, and a slice of dry cheese. That was in the back of the refrigerator. Had I known. I would have gone out for lunch. I'll remember this next time I think about surprising them. I don't want another lunch like that if I can avoid it. So there's some places it needs more punctuation, some places somebody just decided to start putting periods in there. You can kind of see how difficult it can be if you don't look over your work and edit and revise. If I end up with a paragraph, like this one, it's difficult for me to figure out what you're trying to say. Alright, so that's all I have for grammar. What I am going to do is also include an additional video, one of my favorite TED Talks for us to watch to kind of round out the day. I hope you have a wonderful day.